I'll just speak loud enough so you can hear. So I'm going to be in Job chapter 1. Job chapter 1. We start at verse 6, but before we get started, Dad just pray, but it's always a good thing to pray. So let's go ahead and pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I just need your help right now. I pray that you would speak through me. I pray, Holy Spirit, that you would speak through me. I pray that a lot would be accomplished today. We praise you and we glorify you in Jesus' name. Amen. So let's start at verse 6. Verse 6 says, Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, and there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God or not? Hast not thou made a hedge about him, about all his house, and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon himself put not forth thine hand. And Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. Okay, so verse 6, it says the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And the Old Testament is talking about angels. And sort of refers, you have the fallen angels and you have the servants of God, those angels. They're all there before the Lord. That's something to take note of. You really got to realize that. They're all before the Lord, and they're about to listen, take in this conversation between the Lord and Satan. It's a conversation that's going to happen. So Satan's here, all these sons of God, all these angels are here, and let's look what they said. It said, And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Satan said, From going to and fro in the earth, and walking up and down in it. You don't have to turn. This is a pretty famous verse. I'm sure a lot of you know this one. But 1 Peter 5:8. 1 Peter 5:8 says, Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Now, that's a pretty well-known verse, pretty famous verse. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that. But it kind of outlines what he's doing. He says in that verse 7 that he's going to and fro and he's walking up and down. And what's he doing? He's looking for people whom he may devour. That's why he's the devil. He's looking for people whom he may devour. So the Lord said to Satan, Hast thou considered Job? So let me ask you this. Who brought Job up? Was it Satan or was it God? It was Satan. It was God. God brought Job up. He said, Have you considered Job? He said, There's none like him, perfect. He's an upright man. He fears me and eschews evil. God talked well of it. And that's great. But God was the one that brought Job up. It wasn't Satan. I say that for a reason. Let's just think about this logically here. Do you think that Satan, every time he's walking about seeking whom he may devour, do you think when he goes to attack that he gets a permission slip every time he does that? I mean, think about that. Take a look what his response was. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God or not? Hast thou not made a hedge about him and about his house and all that he has on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. And this is why I say this. Let me ask you this. How did Satan know that Job had a hedge about him? How did Satan know that? Because he had already tried to attack Job. He's a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. He had tried to attack Job. God brought Job up. Satan says, well, he has you put a hedge of protection about him. You blessed him. That's how Satan knew that. Before I really get into Satan's response, I'm just going to go with that for a minute. Everybody talks about the sufferings of Job and everything that it went through. But just think about this. How about the fact that God put a hedge of protection about him that whole time? He put a hedge of protection about him, and he blessed him for that many years. I don't know how long it was, but if you read verses 1 through 3, it says that he had 10 children, 7 sons, 3 daughters. It said he had 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 she-asses, a very great household. It says that he was the greatest of all the men of the East. How about the fact that God blessed him? Just saying. But let's get into Satan's response. He says, does Job fear God for nothing? In other words, does he fear you for nothing? God, there's a reason why he fears you. Look what he says. He said, you protected him, you blessed him, you protected him, and you blessed him. God, he's not in this thing because he loves you, because he fears you. He's in this thing from what he can get out of it. That's why he's in this thing. That's why he loves you. That's why he fears you. God, do you really think he just does this for nothing? No, he says he's just like me. That's what men are. That's what men of the earth are. They're all about themselves. And we'll prove it. You just put forth your hand and touch him, and we'll see his true colors. That's what he's saying. So what's Satan trying to do in verse 11 when he says, put forth now thine hand? He's trying to get God to act like him. That's what he's doing. He's trying to get God to act like him. If you have a Bible and you want to turn, I'm going to be in John 10:10. If not, I'll just read loud enough. This pretty well describes, this is pretty good job description of Satan and of Jesus. John 10:10 says, the thief cometh not but for to kill, or to steal, kill, and destroy. But I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. Okay, so who's the thief? Well, that thief is Satan. He cometh not. In other words, the only reason why he comes is to steal, to kill, and destroy. But I am, that's Jesus. He comes that we might have life, that we might have it more abundantly. So there's a pretty sharp contrast here. That's what Jesus does. He gives life and life more abundantly. Satan, all he does is steal, kill, and destroy. So Satan, when he says, put forth thine hand, he's trying to get God to act like him. That's his job. That's what he does. And he says, if you do that, he'll curse you to your face. Now this is important. Look what God's response was in verse 12. It said, and the Lord said unto Satan, behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon himself put not forth thy hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. He says, all that Job has is in your power. It's in your power. He says, I'm not doing it. It's in your power. It makes sense, seeing that he's the God of this world. It's in your power, Satan. What's God doing? Is God doing anything here? How's God interacting? Where is God here? I'll tell you where he is. Only upon himself put not forth thy hand. All he did was move back the hedge of protection. That's all God did. God didn't strike him. He didn't come down on him. He didn't do any of that. All he did was move back the hedge of protection. He was still protecting him. Move back the hedge of protection. Now remember, who's all here? Well, you have all the sons of God, all the angels. They're all listening into this conversation. So God's moving back this hedge of protection because they're all wondering and all questioning what's going to happen. God did. I will say, God did move back the hedge of protection, but he had a very good reason. He had a very good reason. Job didn't understand it, but he had a very good reason. I can't tell you every reason. I can't tell you all the things, all the reasons why stuff happens. But let me say it like this. Romans 8:28 says this. All things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. here's the thing about this verse. A lot of people quote that verse all the time. Here's the question. Who's defining what's good? That's something that you really need to know, because if we don't know that, and we we're going through something, and we wondered, I thought this is supposed to work out for good. Well, it is. You just might not know it. Because God's definition possibly might be different than our definition. So God's definition of good might be different than ours. And I'll tell you this, God's definition of good is always better than ours. So, I can't tell you why everything happens. I'll tell you that was the reason why God moved the hedge of protection back in Job's case. But that's what he did. Now take a look at this, verse 12. It says, so Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. What's it say? Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. Keep that in mind as we read the next couple verses. Verse 13. And there was a day when when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And there came a messenger unto Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the asses feeding beside them. And the Sabeans fell upon them and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the fire of God is fallen from heaven, and hath burned up the sheep and the servants, and consumed them, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the Chaldeans made out 3 bands, and fell upon the camels, and carried them away, yea, and slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness, and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they are dead. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Remember that last phrase in verse 12. I said this, Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. I think that's interesting, because literally right after it says that, all this stuff happened. Remember, he's a thief that comes to steal, kill, and destroy. So all this stuff happened right after it says that. Now, what about verse 16 though? It says, while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the fire of God is fallen from heaven. Let me ask you this question. Was that the fire of God? Was this the fire of God? What was it? Well, the Bible says it's the fire of God. No, the Bible doesn't say it's the fire of God. The Bible says the servant said it was the fire of God. Okay? So it was the servant that said it was the fire of God. The Bible just records what he said. Okay? So, because remember, Jesus comes to give life and life more abundantly. So, all this stuff, it was Satan, because he went forth from the presence of the Lord. All this stuff happened. He's a thief that comes to steal, kill, and destroy. It was Satan that did this. Now this sets Job up. The Satan, I personally believe Satan whispered to that serpent to tell Job that it was the fire of God. I personally believe that. You don't have to agree with me, but that's what I believe, because it set Job up for the rest of the book, pretty much. So, they said it was the fire of God. It wasn't the fire of God. Insurance companies do this all the time. They say it's an act of God. It's not an act of God. Okay, these natural disasters, all this stuff that happens, and somebody might say, well, that's just the judgment of God coming down. No, it's not the judgment of God. If that was the judgment of God, then he missed his mark. They should have blown through this whole earth if that was the case. If that's the judgment of God, then the whole earth should have been flooded. So that's not the judgment of God. That's just Satan trying to do what he does best. Okay? Let me say this. Not everything that happens is the will of God. Not everything that happens is the will of God. Now, this is a simple example. You have a Christian living in sin. It's unfortunate when it happens, but it does happen. Is the will of God being done in their life? No, it's not. And not everything that happens is the will of God. I'm going to turn, now this is something that you want to hear. I'm going to turn to Matthew 6. Matthew 6. This is on the Sermon on the Mount, and I'm talking about the Lord's Prayer here, or reading the Lord's Prayer. It really wasn't his prayer, it was his model prayer, because he didn't need to pray that he'd be forgiven if he never did anything wrong. So this was his model prayer for us. I'm going to start in verse 9. Verse 9 says, After this manner therefore pray ye, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. I don't have to read that more. Okay. This is Jesus' model prayer for us. If he's telling us to pray that his will be done, that the Father's will be done, that must mean that it's not always done. Otherwise, why would he ask us to pray that? Why would he tell us to pray that? Okay, so his will be done, but not just that his will be done. His will be done in earth as it is in heaven. In earth as it is in heaven. What's that mean? That it's done in earth how it is in heaven. Okay? As is a way of saying how. As it is in heaven. Well, how's it like in heaven? Revelation 21:4. Many of you may have heard this verse before. It's a well-known verse. But Revelation 21:4. The Bible says, And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Okay, so I think it's safe to say that this is God's will. It's recorded in the Bible. That's what I would say, plus the fact that God's personally wiping away tears from their eyes. So this is God's will, this is in heaven. Understand, this is the new heaven. And the old heaven and the old earth passed away, this is the new heaven. Well, the reason why there's no more death, no more sorrow, no more crying, or any more pain is because there's no sin. That's done away with. All this stuff follows sin. When sin happens, this stuff happens, right? So sin is done away with. That's why it's not in the new heaven. Okay? Let me ask you this. The current heaven, the one that is right now, current heaven, is there any sin there? No, so there's none of this stuff there either. Okay? The only reason why there would be anything like this is because Satan's up there defiling the place, taking the place up. That's what I believe. That's when Satan went, like we read in verse 6, he went before the presence of the Lord. I believe, according to that verse, he has access to heaven. Plus, Revelation 12:10 says he accuses the brethren night and day. So, if anything is arrayed from this, it's because Satan's up there stinking the place up. Okay? So this is how it is in heaven. This is how it is in heaven. If, in the very least, this is the Lord's will for heaven, right? So this is the Lord's will for heaven. And he told us in the Lord's Prayer to pray that it's in earth, his will be done in earth as it is in heaven. This is the Lord's will for heaven, and he's telling us to pray that his will be done in earth. He wants us to pray, he wants us to pray that his will be done in earth as it is in heaven. That means he wants his will done in earth as it is in heaven. This is his will in heaven. This stuff right here, no more pain, no more sorrow, no more death. He wants that to happen in earth. That means he doesn't want any more crying, sorrow, pain, and he doesn't like to see any tears. So when this stuff happens, it's not the Lord's will. You say, I'm going to turn back to Job. Well, this stuff is not the Lord's will. So with that being said, I'm going to jump down to verse 20. Job didn't get this. Job was a great man. He was an awesome man. He did amazing things, but he didn't get this. Verse 20. Job arose and rent his mantle and shaved his head and fell down upon the ground and worshipped, and said, Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job sinned not, nor charged foolishly. Now, Job didn't sin. He didn't blame God or anything like that. But he did say, the Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Now, did the Lord take away? No, he didn't. That's not the God that I know. He doesn't take away like that. He gives, but he doesn't take away. See, Job was blessed, and God was responsible for that. Satan says in verse 10, Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased. That's what God was responsible for. He was blessed. Job was blessed by God, and that's what he was responsible for. He didn't take away. Satan took away, right? That's what he does. He's a thief that comes to steal, take away, kill, and destroy. Okay? So that's what Satan does. That's who took away. I'll tell you what the Lord did give and take away. This is important. I'll tell you what he did give and take away. He gave us his son so that he could take away our sin. That's what he gave and took away. Amen. So, now Job didn't understand this, but you know what? This is why he's amazing. He didn't understand this, and yet he still worshiped God. That's why he's amazing. He still worshiped God. He said, Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's what he said. He worshiped God, and that's what he said. That's why he's amazing. So folks, let me just break it down here. I preached this message back at our church, Victory Bible Church. There's been a lot of stuff that's going on recently back there. You know, disasters, tragedy usually only happens so many times. Major crisis, tragedy what happens only so many times. As far as we know, this only happened to Job once. And so this was his response. He worshiped God. Because of that, he was remembered for all of eternity. Because he worshiped God. What did he do? So when he worshiped God, you know what he did? What he did was all these sons of God, all these angels that were looking down, watching at him, what he did was he proved to all of them God was right, Satan was wrong, and his faith was real. That's what he did. What I'm saying here is, a lot of times, most people's life is only a few crises, only a few opportunities. And when I say opportunities, I'm not trying to take this lightly, but you have a chance to do something that will be remembered for all of eternity. I understand. I don't know whether there's angels looking down on us, watching us. I don't know if all the angels are looking down upon us, watching us, what we're going to do. I don't know. I do know this, though. Hebrews 12:1 says, Wherefore, seeing we are compassed with so great a cloud of witnesses. Context, Hebrews chapter 11, the Hall of Faith. All of those before us are looking down, watching us, seeing what we're going to do. They're cheering us on. They're looking down, seeing what we're going to do. Not to mention those around us. So what I'm saying here is, we might not be having angels watching us, but we can prove to all those around us. We can do something that can be remembered for all eternity and prove that God is right, Satan is wrong, have your freedom. So with that being said, I'm going to continue on here. I'm just going to keep on going. Chapter 2. It said, Again, there was a day where the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, From whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down it. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job? And there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that fears God and escheweth evil. And still he holdeth fast his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. What's interesting here is if you read verses 1 through 3, it's almost identical to the chapter right before this in verses 6 through 8. It's almost identical. Now there was one thing that changed. It said, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. In the wording, that's like one of the major differences. But almost all the words are about the same as verses 6 through 8 in the chapter before. This tells me that almost next to nothing changed. Almost next to nothing changed in Job. Although all this happened to him, just about next to nothing changed for him. The one thing that did change was this, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. So, let me phrase it like this. Although thou, Satan, movest me, God, against him, Job, to destroy him, Job, without cause. I don't know if that makes any clearer. Now, did God move against him? Well, maybe I should ask it like this. Although thou movest me against him, did Satan somehow twist God's arm to strike Job? No, God's not going to let his arm be twisted by Satan. God created him, and Satan rebelled. He's not going to do that. Did Satan somehow manipulate God to move against him? No, he's not going to be manipulated by Satan. He didn't know. So what does this mean? It means that in Job's mind, God had moved against him. Right? In Job's mind. Now, God didn't actually move against him, but in his mind, that's what Job thought. God says, although you made him think that I did this, he still holds on to his integrity. Once again, that's one of the reasons why Job's amazing. I'm just going to turn to Job 23. This kind of shows where Job's at. Job 23. Job 23 verse 8 says, behold, I go forward, but he is not there, and backward, but I cannot perceive him. On the left hand where he doth work, I cannot behold him. He hideth himself on the right hand, that I cannot see him. But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. So Job had no idea where the Lord was. He said, forward in front of me, he's not there. On my right hand, my left hand, I can't see him behind me. I don't know what he's doing. He said, I can't see the Lord. So he held on to his integrity, but he didn't have much intimacy with the Lord. So Job was amazing because he held on to his integrity, but he still didn't have much intimacy with the Lord. That's what the problem was. And we'll get there at the end. But that's where Job was at. And the reason why I say this is because he thought that God moved against him. He said God moved against him. And after he said this was in chapter 23, so this was after this all happened. Job thought that God moved against him. So in chapter 23, he said, he's in front of me, I can't see him. On the right hand, the left hand, I can't see him. Behind me, I can't see him. So he didn't have much personal contact or intimacy with the Lord. And the reason why I say this is because I don't want anyone to get tripped up by that. God doesn't do this stuff. Okay? God does not do this. Whenever something bad happens, it's not his will. We already talked about that. So don't let that hold you back from going close to him. Okay? So Satan goes on here in verse 4 and said, Satan goes on in verse 4 and he said, and Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. But put forth thine hand now, and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. let me just stop right here. He's doing the same thing again. Satan's doing the same thing again. He says, put forth thine hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. That's what he was trying to get at. He was trying to get Job to curse God to his face. That's what his goal was. And he's doing the same thing. He's trying to get God, he's telling God to do the same thing that he would have done. That's what he does. Okay, he's doing the same trick again. Now look what the Lord says in verse 6. He says, he is in thine hand, but save his life. He's still protecting Job. He moved the fence back a little bit further. He moved the hedge. Now the hedge, actually in the original language, what that means is a fence or a wall. So the fence or wall was moved back a little bit further, but he's still protecting Job. He's still protecting Job. So he says, he's in your hand, but save his life. Now look at verse 7. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. It literally says, it specifically says in verse 7 that Satan smote Job. It specifically says. So in verse 8, it says that he, Job, took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal and sat down among the ashes. Basically, he had these boils on his arms and body. They were pretty bad, and what he actually did was take broken pieces of pottery to kind of scrape them, trying to burst the boils so that it could be a way of healing or some medical procedure. So it was rough for him. Now look at this, verse 9. And his wife said unto him, dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. This was the exact thing that Satan was trying to get him to do, was to curse God. Right? The exact thing. Now, let's just think about this. Job's wife was also going through all this at the same time. All that he had was hers as well. All this oxen, she was his wife, so that was her oxen, her cattle, her household, all this stuff. It was her sons and daughters that died as well. So she was going through it as well. I believe that she was a woman of integrity. Otherwise, I don't think Job would have married her. Not to mention the fact that although she doesn't worship God after the end of when the smoke cleared after chapter 1, although she doesn't worship God, she still doesn't do anything negative. So I think she was a woman of integrity. But when she saw Job being smitten with these boils, it was almost like it's the last straw. That was it. I personally think that Satan left her alive so that he could tell Job to curse God and die. Personally, that's what I believe. You don't have to agree with me. But that's what I believe. So Satan had Job set up real good. The one person that he would have been the closest with, the most intimate with, is the one person telling him to do the thing that he wants. So what's Job's response? And he says, but thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. The foolish women. Okay, so foolish, it can mean wicked, or it can mean foolish. So foolish, that's while they speak, right? Yeah, it is foolish. It is foolish to curse God. You know, but in our society, people do this all the time. Somehow it worked into our language. Atheists, people that don't even believe God, they say all kinds of things. Now, I'm not going to say the particular word the way they do, but they say God is. As if God is the one that's responsible for the damning. And by the way, I am using that word right. Paul uses it in Romans 14. Like that. As if God's the one who's responsible. And they yell out Jesus' name like he was the one that caused all their pain. No, he was the one that took all their pain so that they won't have to go to everlasting pain. That's what he did. So it's foolish for a human being to curse the Creator God and say that. It's foolish to do that. Job's still holding on to his integrity. Now, he still doesn't get this though. He said,
What shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall not we receive evil? Now he still doesn't sin, but he still doesn't get this neither. Now verse 11 talks about his three friends, Bildad, Zophar, and Eliphaz. Watching time, last time I preached it was too long. But, okay, so Bildad, Zophar, and Eliphaz, those were his three friends. You know, most people talk about the sufferings of Job, and yeah, that's something that the book addresses, but if you read through most of the book is a philosophical debate. That's what most of the book is. It's a debate between those three and Job. They maintain that Job sinned somehow, because they believe that God only punishes evil people, or punishes people that have done evil. That's what they believe. So they think that Job does something evil. Job believes that he is righteous. And, well, he was, but he maintained that he was righteous, and he tried to hold up his own integrity. But he also believes that God was the one that did this the whole time. Chapter 13, he says, though you slay me, I'll still serve you. So, that's where they're at. And then chapter 32, Elihu comes in and he says, hey, we don't need to know why God does what he does. We don't need to question God. And he's right. And then chapter 38, what happens is, God specifically speaks to Job. He has this long discourse with Job, and he asks him so many questions. He asks him questions that only he knew the answer to. And so he talks specifically to Job. He talks specifically to Job. And this was the response in chapter 40. I'm going to turn to Job 42. At the end result, this is what happened. I'll start at verse 3, and I'll read through verse 6. It says, who is he that hideth counsel without knowledge? Therefore have I uttered things that I understood not, things too wonderful for me which I knew not. Verse 4, hear I beseech thee, and I will speak. I will demand of thee, and declare thou unto me. I have heard thee by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see thee. Wherefore I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. Verse 6 says he abhors himself and he repents in dust and ashes. Now, let me just ask you this. If Job didn't sin through this whole thing, why would he repent? He didn't sin. What he did was his ideology. He was repenting of his thinking. After he heard from God, it changed his mind. He turned away from that thinking that God was the one that punished him, or God was the one that smitten him. He repented from that. That's why he repented. Otherwise, what would he have to repent of? Okay? So that's what he does in verse 6. By the way, while we're here, verse 10 says this, and the Lord turned the captivity of Job when he prayed for his friends. Also the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. I mean, just saying here, God gave him twice as much as he had before. So, talking about God being responsible, he's responsible for that. He gave him twice as much as he had before. So, just saying that. Well, let me start back at verse 3. He says, therefore have I uttered things that I understood not. I'm doing my best here to explain why certain things happen in the world. I can't give all the answers. Philippians 4 tells us that if we continue in prayer, he'll give us peace that passes understanding. Right? So if he gives peace that passes understanding, what should we do? We're just supposed to accept the peace and not try to find it through the understanding. So that's the best I got. Just accept the peace instead of looking through it or for it through the understanding. Because you're never going to find it that way. So, with that being said, it says, I uttered things that I understood not, things too wonderful me which I knew not. Here I beseech thee, and I will speak, I will demand of thee, declare thou unto me. I have heard thee by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye see. So what's Job saying? What he's saying was, I used to talk about God, now I see him. Folks, here's my goal today. My goal is that hopefully this would help us be people that say the same thing. So that we be people that don't just talk about God, people that actually see. With that being said, I'm going to pray and we'll be done. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you, God, for this time together. I thank you, God, for this your word. I pray that you would use this and that you would speak to people through this, that Holy Spirit, that you would talk to people. And I thank you, God, for what you've done and what you've taught me. And I pray that your will be accomplished, and that we'd always be seeking in Jesus' name.
Said to somebody can see me. And I said, I'm just going to come.
Oh.